Rain lashed the archive windows as I stepped inside, the storm outside twisting like the knot in my chest. I'd driven hours through Michigan's gray to this quiet university basement, chasing voices erased from history. I'm a researcher, piecing together forgotten. The air hung thick with the scent of aged paper and faint mildew as I pushed through the heavy door. This Michigan University archive felt like a forgotten corner of the world, shelves stretching into shadows under low ceilings. I'd come here fleeing the city's academic grind, where queer histories from the 198s got buried under safer narratives. AIDS crises, raids, women loving in secret, erased like footnotes no one bothered to read. My own scars drove it. Relationships silenced by family expectations. A life I'd half hidden to keep moving forward. I needed these stories to make sense of my quiet. She looked up from her ledger as I approached the desk, her hands meticulous, fingers ink-stained from years of cataloging. Calloused at the tips, they paused mid-note, her gaze sharp and assessing as she checked my credentials. "What brings you?" she asked, voice even, but her posture guarded, arms crossed like a barrier. I explained my project, uncovering 198's queer networks in rural Midwest towns, the coded letters, the hidden alliances. She nodded once, no warmth, just professional reserve that mirrored my own walls. I learned to keep vulnerabilities tucked away, especially in places like this, where judgment lingered in the air like dust. We moved to the stacks together, her boots soft on the worn floorboards. The archive's hush amplified every shift, the rain drumming above like a distant heartbeat. She unlocked a side room, pulling out an unlabeled box from a high shelf, its edges frayed from decades untouched. "Donor from the 80s, she said, setting it down with care. "No inventory yet. Fragile contents." Inside, tied with faded ribbon, lay a stack of envelopes, yellowed paper brittle under the touch. Postmarks from small Michigan towns, addresses in looping script. My pulse quickened. These could be it, the raw threads of lives we'd lost. She handed me gloves, her fingers brushing mine brief, cool and steady. I slipped them on, the latex snapping against my skin, and lifted the first envelope. The seal cracked easy, releasing a faint whiff of lavender and thyme. Ink faded, but clear, words spilling across the page in hurried lines. "My dearest E, the factory whistle blows, but all I hear is your laugh from last night's diner booth." My breath caught. Coded but unmistakable. Two women navigating 198's shadows. Touches stolen in broad daylight risks. Her eyes widened as she leaned in, the lamp's glow catching the lines on her forehead. We stood close over the table, the box between us like a shared secret. The storm outside swelled, wind rattling the panes, but in here, the air thickened with something heavier. Our silences pressed, mine from years of half-spoken truths. Hers hinted in the way her hand hovered, not quite pulling back. The letters pulled us closer, ink drawing us into their world, forcing cracks in our own guarded edges. The shelves loomed endless around us, rows of forgotten volumes leaning like weary sentinels in the fading light. Late afternoon filtered through high, narrow windows, casting long shadows that stretched across the floor like fingers reaching for secrets. Dust motes swirled in the beams, catching the air's heaviness, the kind that settled into your lungs with every breath. This place wasn't just storage. It was a tomb for stories no one claimed. Michigan's rural heart buried under layers of academia's indifference. I traced a spine with my gloved finger, the leather cracked and cool, feeling the weight of all that silence. I'd left the city behind months ago, trading lecture halls for this isolation, the grind of urban tenure tracks too loud for my unraveling edges. Academia there had chewed through me, endless papers on safer histories, queer voices sidelined as niche. My last relationship had cracked under it all, her leaving in the night after one too many arguments about my obsessions, my quiet refusals to fit the mold. "You're always digging up ghosts," she'd said, door clicking shut like final punctuation. The drive north had been my escape, Michigan's flat fields blurring past, promising space to breathe, to unearth what I'd buried in myself. Solitude suited the scars. Or so I thought. until this archive pulled me deeper.
She watched me from across the table, her calloused fingers drumming soft on the wood, relics of handling thousands of pages without mercy. Those hands moved deliberate, turning her ledger with a precision that spoke of routines etched deep. Most researchers skim, she said, voice low, breaking the hush like a pebble in still water. You look like you stay. Sparse words, but they carried hints, her gaze lingering on the letters, a flicker of something personal behind the professional mask. Born here, I guessed, in these small towns where secrets stayed locked. Her family stories may be tangled in the same erasures. She poured coffee from a thermos, steam curling up between us, the bitter scent grounding the room's mustiness. Black, no sugar, she slid a mug my way, our knuckles brushing accidental, warm through the chill. We settled into the reading room, awkwardness hanging like fog off Lake Michigan. The table was scarred oak, lamps casting pools of yellow on scattered notes. I sipped the coffee, hot against my tongue, while she flipped through the box's edges, her breath steady but eyes darting to the envelopes. These came in 85, she murmured, tracing a postmark. Donor anonymous, factory towns mostly. Women working shifts, lives packed tight. Her fingers paused on one, the ribbon frayed, and I nodded, the steam blurring her face for a second. Shared quiet, not uncomfortable yet, but thick with unspoken parallels. My city escapes felt distant here, her rural roots mirroring the letters world. Small-town diners, coded glances over lunch counters, affections hidden in plain sight. The first hints unfolded slow as we read on. The women's words painting 198's grit. Midnight drives to empty shores, hands linked under diner tables, laughter muffled against factory noise. Your touch lingers like smoke from the line, one wrote, clear as daylight despite the veil. Their love bold in fragments, defying raids and whispers, small rebellions in a state that turned blind eyes. She leaned closer, coffee forgotten, her shoulder inches from mine. The awkwardness eased into something tentative, our breaths sinking over the pages, the room's shadows deepening as rain tapped insistent. Then a particular envelope caught the light, thicker, its seal unbroken. My hand reached first, hers following, and as it broke with a soft tear, her fingers found mine over the page, warm and unyielding, pulling us both into the ink's quiet pull. The envelope's flap gave way under my thumb, the paper rasping soft like dry leaves underfoot. Inside, the letter unfolded, its creases worn from years folded tight. The texture caught my gloved fingers, brittle edges flaking faint, the center smoother where hands had pressed it close. A whiff rose then, lavender faint but sharp, clinging to the fibers like a memory that wouldn't fade. It pulled me in, evoking hidden desires, the kind pressed into night air by Lake Michigan's shores. The words spilled clear, no codes this time, just raw ink. E. Last night by the waves, your hand in mine under the moon. The water lapped cold, but you warmed everything. Factory days drag without that touch. Stolen hours where we breathe free. I read it aloud, voice low in the reading room's hush, the rain outside a steady patter against the glass. Her fingers tightened on mine, warm through the latex, holding the page steady between us. The archivist froze then, her breath catching sharp, eyes widening over the lines. The lamp's glow hit her face, shadows pooling under her jaw, and I saw it. The explicit queer longing laid bare, no veils left. Two women in 198's Michigan, meeting, secret by those churning shores, waves crashing like unspoken fears. Their love vivid, salt spray on skin, fingers tracing sand-damp collars, kisses hidden in the roar of wind off the lake. No shame in the ink, just hunger, bold against the era's raids and whispers. My chest tightened as I traced the next line, her grip anchoring me. Ethical boundaries pressed in, this private pain, spilled for no one but each other, now cracked open under our gaze. Was it recovery, pulling these lives from erasure's grip, or theft, exposing? She didn't pull away. Instead, her thumb brushed my knuckle, deliberate, slow. My aunt, she whispered, voice cracking like thin ice. Same time, same towns. Letters like these, burned after she passed.
Family called it unfortunate attachments. Swept it under rugs in our farmhouse. Erased her whole. The admission hung there, raw, her eyes distant but locked on the page. Calloused fingers trembled faint, years of handling relics now touching her own ghosts. Michigan's rural grip, conservative roots choking queer truths. Her story echoed the letters, silences passed down like heirlooms. I nodded, the warmth of her hand seeping through, my conflict easing just a fraction in the shared weight. We lingered over that letter, the shore's pull vivid in my mind, cold water numbing feet, but heat building where bodies met in the dark. Her reaction lingered too, that frozen pause breaking into quiet nods, eyes tracing the ink like paths she'd walked herself. The ethical we tried to pull back into procedure then, the reading room's table, a makeshift catalog station under the single lamp. I spread the letters out, gloved hands steady as I noted dates and senders. E to M, postmarked from factories along the lakeshore, 1985 through 87. Professional distance. That's what I aimed for. Jotting ink types, paperweights, anything to frame this as archive work, not the raw ache spilling from the pages. She mirrored me at first, her calloused fingers sorting envelopes with that meticulous care, ledger open, pencil scratching faint. The rain eased to a drizzle outside, but the air stayed close, charged like the hush before a thunderclap. But the emotional pull interrupted sharp. I lifted the next letter, unfolding it slow, and there it was, a shared gasp as the words hit. M. The shift ends at dusk, but I'll wait in the diner's back booth, your hand slipping under the table like a secret no one sees. Coded notes from their world. Factory whistles piercing the air, grease-stained aprons hiding quick brushes of fingers, stolen touches amid the clatter of plates and small-town stares. Flashback gripped me, the women's lives vivid, one slipping out after overtime, driving dirt roads to a lakeside pull-off, the other waiting with a thermos of coffee, moonlight glinting off the water as they leaned close, breaths mingling in the truck's cab. No names spoken loud, just the press of palms, the risk of headlights sweeping by. I tried to maintain distance, shifting my chair back an inch when her knee brushed mine under the table, the contact warm through denim, accidental in the tight space. Pull away, I told myself. Keep it ethical. Researcher and archivist. Lines clear as the ledger's columns. My scars itched under the thought. City relationships where closeness turned to blame, silences widening into doors slammed shut. I focused on the page, voice even as I read another snippet aloud, but her presence tugged, that faint lavender still clinging to the air, mixing with the coffee's bitter edge gone cold. Failure came quick. She took the letter next, her voice cracking on a passage about forbidden love. E. They raid the bars again, but here in the booth, your eyes say we're safe. One touch and the world's noise fades. The crack hung there, raw, her eyes glistening under the lamp, drawing my empathy closer like a tide pulling at the shore. I couldn't look away, her guarded posture softening, shoulders dropping as if the words unearthed her aunt's burned pages all over. The try crumbled, my hand reached across, not for the envelope, but to steady hers. Fingers overlapping warm, the latex barrier thin now, almost nothing. Sensory escalation built from there, the dim lamp's warmth pooling on our hands, casting golden edges where skin met skin. Dust motes danced in the light like unspoken words, swirling lazy as our breaths synced, shallow and quick. The table's oak scratched under my free palm, grounding the pull, but her knee pressed again, deliberate this time, heat seeping through fabric. I pulled back once more, chair scraping faint, mumbling about cross-referencing dates, but the failure looped, her gaze held mine, empathy flooding back. The letter's factory grit mirroring our own tensions, shifts of restraint cracking under hidden wants. We pushed on, cataloging deeper, but each envelope unraveled more. Notes on dodging family eyes at church picnics, touches in the diner's dim corner where waitresses turned blind. The women's code. The lake calls us, for midnight meets. Felt too familiar, echoing my city hides, her rural suppressions. Try. I stood to fetch a reference book from the stacks, space opening cool between us. Fail. She followed, hand grazing my elbow in the narrow aisle, the archive's shadows closing in. her breath close enough to stir my hair. The emotional current strengthened, professional masks slipping, our silences filling with the letter's bold fragments.
Night fell outside, windows black now, the drizzle turning to wind that rattled the panes like insistent knocks. The archive locked at dusk, but we'd lingered too long, revelations deepening as the building emptied, sealing us in with the stack's weight. Her hand found mine again over the last envelope, not pulling away, the warmth a quiet insistence against the growing dark. We dove deeper into the letters as the night thickened, the archive's lamps the only light now, casting long pools on the table. Her hand stayed on mine, warm anchor against the cool paper. I unfolded the next one, ink bolder here, words spilling urgent. E. The raid hit the bar last week. Sirens wailing, hands grabbing at shadows. We slipped out the back, hearts pounding, drove north to that old cabin by the river. Rural hideout, just us and the current rushing past. No more city edges. Here, we hold each other without the world's eyes. The 198's raids came alive in those lines. Michigan's conservative grip tightening, police sweeping queer spaces, women scattering like leaves in a gale. Factories by day, fear by night. But they fled to those hideouts. Barns and cabins dotting the countryside, breaths shared under quilted roofs, bodies pressing close against the chill of pursuit. Her fingers squeezed mine then, the tremor faint but there, rippling up her arm. I felt it sync with my own pulse, the letter's escapes mirroring paths we'd both half-walked. She pulled the page closer, eyes tracing the ink, and the words pulled her confession out slow. Grew up in a town like that, she said, voice low, breaking the hush like gravel under tires. Conservative Michigan, farm stretching flat, church every Sunday with eyes on every pew. My identity, suppressed deep, like roots choked under frost. Girls at school, glances that lingered too long, but family whispers shut them down. Not here, they'd say, Bibles thumping like warnings. I learned to hide, catalog lives instead of living mine. Aunt's letters burned, but they echoed in me. Raids on the news, friends vanishing quiet. Her guarded past spilled then, raw edges showing. Upbringing in that rural squeeze, affections buried under chores and expectations. A life pieced from silences that scarred as deep as any raid. I tried to stay objective, gloved hand lifting to note the letter's date in my journal, 1986, post-raid surge. But failure hit quick. My thumb slipped, tracing her wrist instead, the skin warm and veined faint under the lamp's glow. Calluses rough there, from years gripping pens and boxes, but the pulse beneath quickened, betraying the crack. I froze, the touch lingering. Her skin soft where the bone rose, a quiet map of tensions held too long. The letter's hideouts flashed, women fleeing to riversides, hands clutching in the dark, and it blurred with us. Archive walls closing like those cabins, our barriers thinning in the shared dark. I wanted to pull back, keep the researcher line sharp, but her warmth drew me, thumb circling slow. The fail pulling empathy deeper, our suppressed worlds brushing close. She didn't flinch. Instead, her free hand covered mine, holding the trace, eyes lifting to meet mine in the dim. Keeps coming back, she murmured, tremor in her voice now, not just her wrist. Mutual vulnerability hung there, her conservative chains mirroring my city masks, both silences built to survive, but cracking under the ink's weight. I tried again to redirect, flipping to my academic notes, pencils scratching dates and contexts, framing the raids as historical data, not the ache they stirred. We should cross-reference the bar locations, I said, voice steady, but the words fell flat, the tremor in her grip revealing more, the shared fear of exposure, the pull toward what we'd hidden. Rain pattered the windows then, sharp and insistent, breaking the thickened silence, drops racing like tears down the glass. It mirrored the internal storms churning, raids echoes in her past, my buried desires surfacing, the archive air heavy with unsaid wants, steam from forgotten coffee curling faint. We sat like that, hands linked over the pages, the letters' rural flights pulling our confessions closer. Her tremor eased into steady warmth. Vulnerability no longer solo, but echoed.
the conservative upbringing's frost thawing in the touch. My objective fail looped soft now, thumb still on her wrist, the sensory tie grounding us, pulse sinking, rain drumming, paper rasping under our joined hold. The barriers cracked wider, silences filling with breaths that matched. The women's hideout embraces feeling less distant, more like the space we claimed here. A letter shifted then, the stack leaning, and a small photo slipped out, fluttering to the table. Faces stared back, two women, arms linked by a riverbank, smiles defiant against the 198's backdrop, forcing the pivotal choice between us, hands still clasped tight.
The photo lay flat on the table, edges curled like waves frozen mid-crash. Black and white, but the women's faces burned sharp. Mid-30s, hair tied back under factory caps, arms slung casual around each other's waists by that riverbank. Smiles wide, defiant, eyes locked like they knew the camera might out them someday. 198's Michigan, the date stamped faint on the back. Summer 86, post-raid. Their hideout captured, bodies close in daylight risk, no codes needed. My gloved finger traced the grainy line of their shoulders, the intimacy stark against the era's shadows. This wasn't just letters now, it was proof. Ghosts staring back, demanding we decide their fate. Her hand tightened on mine, calluses pressing into my palm, the warmth cutting through the latex chill. We stared down together, breaths shallow, in the archive's hush. Rain a distant murmur beyond the walls. The ethical dilemma hit hard then. Publish this discovery, digitize the stack for queer networks online, pull these women from erasure's grip. Recovery, I call it in my papers, a bridge across silences. But risks loomed. Exposing ghosts to scrutiny, family remnants in those small towns digging up old shames, the women's bold love twisted into scandal decades late. Or bury it, like so many others. Shelve the box unlabeled. Let it fade into the stack's dust. Safe, but lost. My project needed this, voices like theirs to counter the textbook's blanks. But the photo's gaze tugged doubt, their privacy a weight heavier than the bundle. I shifted closer, her knee warm against mine under the table, and voiced it soft. We could share this quietly. Academic circles first. Protect the names. Push for exposure, light on the hidden paths they'd carved. But she resisted, hand pulling the photo back gentle, fingers clenching the faded ribbon tying the stack. The silk frayed under her grip, threads giving like old resolve. No, she said, voice low, edged with that rural caution. These aren't yours to claim. Aunt's letters burned for a reason. Families here still whisper, judge from pews. Expose them, and it's raids all over, just with keyboards now. Her eyes flicked to the image, pain flickering there, conservative roots clenching tight against the pull. Hands stayed linked, but tension coiled in her arm. Resistance a barrier I'd felt in my own city walls. The conflict pulled my confession out then. Words spilling like ink on damp paper. I get it. My silence. Parallel to theirs, 198's echoes in my life. City academia, where queer work gets sidelined, too niche for grants. I hid relationships, coded affections in emails, fearing tenure boards or family calls. One lover left because I wouldn't shout it. Stayed quiet to survive, like them dodging sirens. The women's struggles blurred with mine. Factory shifts masking touches, my lectures veiling truths. Her grip softened a fraction, eyes meeting mine over the photo, the shared parallel cracking her resistance, just a hair. But the dilemma hung, exposure's light versus burial's dark. Our hands the only steady thing. I leaned in for comfort then, shoulder brushing hers, the fail cycle spinning quick. Her warmth drew me, breath close enough to stir the air between pages, but retreat hit, professional fallout flashing, credentials questioned, archive access revoked, my project crumbling under ethics boards. I pulled back sharp, chair scraping faint on the floorboards, mumbling about guidelines, distance snapping in like a cold wind off the lake. But the pull looped,
her hand not releasing, drawing me close again, empathy flooding back. Lean in, retreat, her knee pressed firmer, grounding the cycle, the photo's defiant smiles urging us past the fear.
Sensory anchor held us there. Her breath warm on my neck as she leaned over the fragile image, exhaling slow across my skin, carrying faint coffee and the archive's must. Gooseflesh rose, not from chill, but the intimacy building through the clash. Her resistance softening into questions, my push yielding to her caution. The ribbon in her clenched fist loosened, fingers uncurling to trace the photo's edge with mine, warmth sinking pulses. Arguments faded then, voices dropping to murmurs over raid dates and safe shares, the conflict forging quiet alliance. We agreed on private digitizing, networks only, no public blaze. Hands lingered on the same letter now, the one describing that riverbank hold. Our touches mirroring theirs, tentative but unyielding in the dim light. We unpacked the final letters then, the stack thinning under the lamp's flicker, each envelope heavier with what waited inside. Her fingers worked beside mine, calluses scraping faint against the ribbon's last knots. The air tasted of dust and lavender now, thick as the confession spilling out. I lifted the top one, seal cracking like thin bone, and the words hit raw. M. The clinic lines grow longer, friends fading to that shadow sickness. AIDS whispers through the factories, but our love vows stronger. No rejection from blood or bug will break us. Meet me at the river. Promise forever in the current's rush. 198's fears bled through the ink. Family doors slamming on queer kin, rejections carving deeper than any raid. Their explicit vows stood bold. Bodies entwined against the terror, hands clasped through quarantines. Love a defiance scrawled in hurried nights. Michigan's rural isolation, both cage and sanctuary. She read the next aloud, voice steady at first, but cracking on the lines about family shunning. E. They called you unnatural. Doors locked when I came calling. But here, in our hideout, your arms say otherwise. Vows sealed in skin. No church words needed. The parchment trembled in her grip, ink blurring faint under the lamp. Then it came, her breakdown, tears welling slow, dropping onto the page like rain on dry earth. One hit the vow's center, spreading dark, and she froze, shoulders hunching tight. I moved without thought, arms sliding around her, steadying the shake that rippled through her frame. Her head leaned into my shoulder, warm weight pressing close, the scent of her hair, faint soap and archive must, filling the space between us. Tears soaked my sleeve, hot and silent, her body curling toward mine in the dim. I tried to separate then, rolls snapping back like cold wire. We should stop, I murmured, pulling my arm away gentle, the space opening, chill between us. Researcher, archivist. Boundaries clear. Ethics demanding distance before dawn's light exposed too much. My own pulse raced, the pull warring inside. Her warmth lingered on my skin, but fallout loomed. Projects tainted. Silences shattered in professional glare. I stood, gloved hands folding the letter careful, aiming for the ledger's safety. Whispers of validation dying on my tongue. But the fail pulled stronger. She reached, fingers catching my wrist, drawing me down again, her gaze lifting wet but fierce. Stay, she whispered, voice raw. This validates what I buried. My aunt's fire. My own quiet fights. Yours too, isn't it? Shared words bridged us, her validation echoing mine. The try crumbling as I sank back, arm returning, her shoulder fitting against me like a missing piece. The pull strengthened in those whispers, her breath warm on my collar, sinking with mine in the hush. We lingered over the vows, her tears easing into soft nods, the AIDS fears in the ink mirroring erasures we'd both dodged, friends lost to stigma, families turning blind. My hand found her back, rubbing slow circles over the fabric, feeling the rise and fall beneath. Steady now, but vulnerable still. The archive's shadows deepened,
lamps humming faint, but complication stirred. A distant alarm buzzed low, closing time long past, the building's lock engaging with a click that echoed. Trapped longer, no escape till morning staff arrived, the night sealing us with the letter's weight. Rain picked up outside, wind rattling panes, but inside the air warmed, our bodies leaning closer over the table, knees touching firm. Her gaze held mine then, eyes dark pools in the low light, boundaries blurring soft as the inks fade. No more tries, just the turn. Her hand cupping my cheek, thumb tracing my jaw's line, rough but tender, pulling me into the emotional swell. Pulses thudded together, the validation complete in that hold. Our legacies confronting head-on. Hers rural burns, mine city veils, now woven with the women's vows. Dawn loomed faint through the high windows, gray edges creeping in, forcing the decision. What to do with these ghosts? Our own silences cracking wide under the pull. Dawn's gray crept through the high windows, faint light slicing the archive's shadows. But we stayed, bent over the letters, hands still linked across the table. The final vows lay open, ink smudged from her earlier tears, their words a quiet demand. Love sealed against all odds. No more hiding in Michigan's folds. I felt the weight then, our own legacies pressing. Her aunt's burned pages, my city silences, the women's bold strokes mirroring us both. We digitize privately, I said, voice low, the words settling like dust after a gust. Share in networks only. No names, no blaze. Preserve without the risk. She nodded slow, eyes lifting to mine, the resistance gone, replaced by a shared resolve that warmed the chill air. Her hand released the photo, sliding up to cut my face, palm rough against my cheek, calluses scraping faint like sand from those 198 shores. I leaned into it, the touch grounding, her thumb tracing my jaw's curve, steady now, no tremor left. Foreheads touched then, skin warm where we met, breaths mingling close in the dim. Her scent wrapped me, faint soap under the archive's must, lavender clinging from the pages. Pulses synced through the contact, thudding soft like waves lapping a hidden beach, the women's riverbank hold, coming alive in us. Revelations collided sharp, our silences broken, not with shouts but this quiet press, mirroring their triumphant survival through raids and rejections. No more ethical lines blurring into fear. We'd crossed them together. Recovery, a pact, sealed in touch. The sensory payoff swelled, her fingers threading into my hair, light pull tilting my head closer. Heat bloomed where foreheads rested, seeping down my neck, the archive's cool air forgotten. Dust motes caught the creeping light, dancing lazy between us, while rain's last patter faded outside, leaving only our breaths, shallow and matched. Her eyes held mine inches away, dark pools reflecting the lamp's dying glow, vulnerability raw but unafraid. "This validates it all," she whispered, lips brushing my temple faint, the words vibrating through skin. My hand rose, mirroring hers, cupping her neck, thumb on her pulse, feeling it quicken then steady, our hidden wants surfacing like ink under heat. Affection coded no longer, bold in the gray dawn. Boundary crossed in that hold, the professional dissolved soft as the light shifting. Her lips found mine, quiet kiss sealing the pact. No rush, just the press, warm and unyielding. Taste of coffee lingered faint, mixed with the paper's dry edge. Her mouth yielding slow, exploring the give. My free hand slid to her waist, fabric bunching under fingers, pulling her closer across the table's scatter. The letters crinkled beneath us, envelopes shifting like whispers, but we didn't break. Tongues touched, tentative, heat building deep, her breath hitching against my lips, the kiss deepening to match the vow's fire. Defiant, alive against erasures past and present. We pulled back slow, forehead still touching, breaths ragged in the hush. Her eyes searched mine, soft now, the guarded walls crumbled, possibility humming in the space between. The archive felt alive then, shelves no longer tombs but bridges, Michigan's winds carrying forward what we'd claimed. Morning light filtered stronger, gold edges gilding the stacks, transforming isolation into connection. Our hands dropping to clasp over the open box, fingers laced tight. We ease back from the table then, the letter's weight lifting slight as we pack them with care, gloved hands moving in sync over the envelopes. Her fingers brushed mine, deliberate now, no accidents left, the ribbon tying neat under our joined pull. The box closed with a soft thud, sealed for private digitizing, scans shared only in trusted queer networks, no public flood, names veiled like the women's own codes. Preservation without erasure, are packed solid in the growing light, Michigan's morning filtering through the windows, turning the stacks from shadows to shelves alive with possibility. My arc shifted there, from lone seeker digging ghosts to partner in this quiet recovery, her empathy cracking my city scars wide. I'd come chasing silences to fill my own, but now they echoed shared, her touch a bridge across the divides. The drive north felt distant, academia's grind replaced by this, hands laced over faded ink, vulnerabilities no longer buried but voiced in whispers. Her warmth lingered on my skin, pulse steady where our wrists met, the internal storms settling into calm, like waves receding from Lake Michigan's shores after a gale. No more fleeing. This archive, this woman, grounded me, turning solitude into something woven, resilient. She stood slow, testing the room's edges, her guarded walls yielding full in the daylight. Eyes soft now, no sharpness left. Just a curve at her lips as she traced the box's lid, calluses faint against the wood. "Feels right," she murmured, voice low. The conservative frost thawed in her posture, shoulders loose for the first time. Vulnerability open. No more hiding behind ledgers or family burns. Her aunt's echoes claimed, not lost. We moved together to the stacks, reshelving side volumes, her arm brushing mine in the narrow aisles, intentional warmth seeping through sleeves. The archive hummed faint with morning stir, distant doors creaking as staff arrived. But we lingered, breaths matched in the hush. Shared optimism bloomed then. Legacy recovered not as triumph, but quiet forward motion. Our stories intertwined like the women's ink, factory grit to river vows, now ours in digit scans and late-night talks. No grand exposures, just subtle shares, in networks where queer seekers like you might find them, piecing their own paths. Her hand found my waist as we stepped back, pulling me close for a beat, foreheads touching again, the light gilding our faces. Pulses synced once more, steady thud against the archive's calm, possibility humming in the clasp. The final image settled as we walked out together, the box under her arm, my notes tucked close. Michigan winds whipped cool outside, carrying forward what we'd unearthed. Silences bridged, boundaries crossed into connection. Rain scent hung in the air, earth damp and alive, mirroring the thaw inside. Her gaze met mine at the door, soft promise in the green flecks, hands brushing one last time before the world pulled us apart. But it wasn't ending. It was the start. Legacies laced tight, walking side by side into the gray dawn. The box stayed with us, truths unbound and quiet networks we'd build. If this pull of hidden legacies resonates, share your story below. What silence did you break? Subscribe for more Sapphic journeys through forgotten paths.